Welcome to another episode of This is Bet on TCREG. We are back with another episode, and as you already know, me, Randy, Chase, but now we have a phenomenal guest today. Not only is he the owner of Houston Duplex, you guys make sure to follow him on IG. He also does He also does development, also does new build, new construction, and honestly, Mr. Gilbert is one person that you guys should look to follow and tap in with because his knowledge is true. This is not just fake social media game. This is honest in the streets, real wisdom. And so I want to thank you, Mr. Gilbert, for your time.
Thank you, Randy, and obviously thank you, Chase. It's a pleasure to be on the show today and also an honor. So I thank you guys for sharing your space, and I really look forward to contributing to, not only your viewers, but whoever else is watching, because it's important that, people actually take some of the context and some things that you don't necessarily see because there's a lot of stuff going on, but we always want to provide good information and feedback because if you're investing in the same communities we are, then of course we want you to have good experiences and we want you to thrive because if you thrive, then we all thrive together.
Right? Absolutely. Right. And I love that. And we're never going to miss out on introducing that guy, that dude, that man, Mr. Randy, right? You guys already know why we have him on the show. It's Mr. Consistent, Mr. Diligent. And so we're going to jump off and get this conversation started talking about Houston, Harris County, because that's where we are. That's the communities that we are investing in and helping our clients, buyers, viewers like you invest in. And a big buzz that really is just kind of, I think, I would maybe say in the last 5 years, talking about duplexes and Airbnbs. And I don't know if we always have the full conversation of people that are actually in Houston, Harris County doing it, right? Because every market is different. And I always say that the real estate market that you're in is the one that matters most, right? So you could be talking to somebody that's in DC or Virginia or LA, and they may be great for conversation, but if they're not actually in your local market, you're not going to be able to transfer all that information.
Absolutely.
To your situation. So let's just jump into it. How did you get started with investing and building?
So just to make it really quick, the way I got started was basically my wife and I, we were both employed at our different jobs as, regular employees. And, we knew that we had to do something a little bit different to help secure our future and create legacy for our kids as well. So, we started out by obviously buying our own personal home. I believe in home ownership. I know you guys hear a lot out there about it's dumb to own homes, but I'm here to tell you it's a great thing to be a homeowner, and I think it's something I advocate and really, think everyone should do. But nonetheless, so my wife and I, we were working. We started getting into some BRRRR real estate investments where we would buy existing properties, kind of fix them up and then sell them. Then we also then got into long-term rentals.
Okay.
And so that was just our start of investing, getting into long-term rentals. My wife is from the Sunnyside neighborhood in Houston, so we would go to church there every Sunday while we were still dating. And one of the things we noticed about the community was just, there were a lot of vacant lots. There was a lot of a lack of development. So we kind of piqued our interest there and asked the right people questions, and then it led us to development.
So were you guys what came first, development or buying?
Yeah, first it was buying and landlording in existing properties. We would buy existing single-family rentals, the 1950s, 1960 builds. We'd buy those. We would get tenants in them, whether they were, regular private tenants or even Section 8 Houston Housing Authority tenants. So it was a mix of the two.
Okay. So the first purchases that you guys were doing were single families?
Yes, absolutely.
And then how many of those did you go through before you started getting into duplexes?
We went through about 4 of the single family home purchases before we got into new construction duplexes. We had great experiences with the single family homes. Most of them we still own to this day. But, it came to a point where, especially in the specific subdivision where we were looking, subdivision called Sunnyside Gardens, they were oversized lots. They were 60 feet by 200 feet. So it presented us a unique opportunity to build duplexes, right? If you go back to the area, the last time duplexes were built in Sunnyside was like between 2005 and 2008, prior to the Great Recession. And so post and after that, banks, both conventional lenders and non-QM lenders, they were a little hesitant to lend in that area. So we kind of did cut our teeth being one of the first ones post the Great Recession to get back into the community and start building new ground up duplexes.
So that was kind of like a transition type of thing going into 2008, 2009 that you started
No,
building
no, no.
duplexes,
So
or
then, at that point, we were only homeowners.
Okay.
We didn't start the idea and concept of building duplexes until 2016.
okay,
So that's when we acquired our first lot. And it was interesting because we made a mistake. What mistake we made? We bought one of those big oversized lots and we only built one duplex on it because we didn't understand,
That you could've-
the possibilities of replatting and all
Wow.
those types of things. And the density that now, Houston, obviously with, the new ordinances they passed, they really are a proponent of the density now and these
Right.
new structures. So we built to rent. It was a great experience for us because we kind of got our first taste of building brand new and having to lease it, having to manage it,
Right.
that whole process. Because prior to that, we would buy existing single family homes that already had a tenant in place. So that's something I say that's a
that's nice though.
thing people should look for, even in single family or multi-unit. If you can at all possibly, it's always good to already, especially if you're new, get something with some
Sure.
cash already going into it because it kind of helps you weather the storm as you get better as being a property manager and landlord.
Would you say that was kind of early going into 2016, 2015, when you were starting to build?
Yeah, it was going early into 2016, and interestingly enough, so we were going through processes with the city,
Right.
and so because I had no building experience then, to get lending back then, you had to have, and even today, you
Some
have
type
to
of
have
experience.
because the way these lenders look at it, anytime you're dealing with a new construction loan, it's going to be a short-term loan, max 12, maybe 15 months. And so they want to make sure that you're able to execute. So at that time, we didn't have any relationships with any general contractors, but interestingly enough, there was a new construction single-family house being built on the same exact street across the street. They had a sign out front. So naturally, I called, got a chance to meet with the gentleman. There were two, older guys, probably late 50s, early 60s. So that really enhanced my trust level in them. But,
Even
So
still.
it was a partnership that you kind of got
no,
into.
it wasn't really a partnership. We hired them privately, and I felt comfortable because they were older and more mature. So I thought, partnering with these guys, everything should go well. But that was another mistake I learned. You always have to vet who you're going to work with, who you're going to structure deals with banks,
Right.
because experience is important. And at that time, they really weren't as experienced as,
believe they were.
I
Or,
believe they were. So.
Was it kind of like,
And that's really interesting though. Let's pause right there because you covered a couple of things, right? If we kind of pull back the journey. So you started with single family homes, and so your background wasn't in development or new
Not at all.
construction.
Not at all.
You just black man and his wife buying house, buying real estate.
Yep, that's
Okay,
what it
so
was.
so let's pin that right there because Randy, we have a lot of conversations, and today you're talking about 2008, which I'm going to touch on in just a second. Today, a lot of people are jumping into duplexes, right?
Yes.
Wanting to skip the whole
Yep.
single family process, and you'll even hear people say like, "Why would you do that? FHA loan, you get two houses instead of one."
Right,
So,
right. Yep.
what are your thoughts on that? Just because we got a lot of people that they're just kind of figuring out what's the best move for them. Getting started, even if you were to look back now, would you have still gone the same path, single family first
So
to duplex?
obviously it's cheating because knowing what I know now, if I could go back in time, even the decision my wife and I made to buy our first home in Pearland, Texas, we wouldn't have done that. We would have immediately have gone into multi-unit housing because you can purchase them with the same loan.
Right.
The caveat here is, everyone's financial situation is unique and different. You have to understand what you can afford, what you're comfortable with. And then when you get into a position of being a landlord, the assumption is you collect rent every month. And I'm here to tell you guys, that's just not the case at all.
Y'all don't be wanting to pay rent.
Right.
So he gonna tell y'all,
Yep.
like, it ain't always just, cash flow king.
Yeah, it's not always cash flow king. Of course, there are things you can do to help mitigate, right? You have to vet very carefully. There are different tips we can talk about later to help you vet. But the assumption is you're going to be collecting rent every month, and that's just not true. especially in these times right now,
Right.
it's tough on
Right.
everyone right now, right? So we institute some grace, obviously, but at a certain point, you also have to remember that you're in business,
This
right?
is a business.
And so effectively, you have to make sure that you're taking steps to make sure that your business outcomes are good. So that's something I'm sure we'll talk about and
Right.
touch on later.
Right. I mean, I think like a few things that you did mention was that you also need to be aware about your financial situation and
Correct.
if you actually are capable of financing a duplex straight in. Because something that we've also talked about, even when we're consulting with clients, is that it's not to say that you cannot purchase the duplex and do whatever it is that you want with it. The thing is that also, can you stomach the monthly payment if there is no tenant in the other unit? So I think that's a very real thing that you said. That's like, you want the cash flow, and sometimes you also do need to know that you're running a business, and can you still weather the storm if
Absolutely.
said tenant does not pay for that
Absolutely.
month? You know,
Absolutely. Tenant may not pay. You may have a tenant skip out and also move out. And then, that presents another challenge. When you become a landlord, anytime people or, companies move into your spaces, when they leave, you're going to have to make it ready and get it ready for the next group to come in. And that's an expense a lot of people, especially when they're first starting out, they just don't understand, right? What make-ready expenses are and how they can really shift based on like what tenants were in there and like what were they doing in there. Were they smoking in there?
right?
Did they have carpets, and do they have a lot of young children that maybe, like I did when I was a young child, just, destroy your carpet?
Did they bring pets in that
Right.
you didn't know
That's
about?
a
So
big
now you're
thing.
like, why does it smell like dog in here? I
Absolutely.
know I said no pets. So I
Yep.
just think it's like, how do you then feel as if that, or believe, or based off of what you've done, that people who are now looking to come into this game can look to understand that there's about 2-3 things that you need to know before you look to even think that you're gonna it's a sense of competition, right? You're
Yeah.
not the only one in the market.
Yeah, you're not the only one in the market. You want to really take a long-term approach in your business. That's my,
That's
that's
good.
my perspective.
That's good.
You don't want to focus so much on the here and now. You want to focus on the long-term sustainability. As you mentioned, there are different challenges when you deal with tenants, right? There's a stat right now in America, I think like 75% of households in America have a pet. So as a landlord, it's a double-edged sword to say, I'm not going to allow any pets, because then what you also do is you disqualify yourself from some of the marketplace.
Right.
Me and Legend are coming.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Most Americans right now have pets. That's a reality. It's just managing around the pets, and also, just having very clear communication with your tenant and the expectations around the pet. I have tenants now that have pets, obviously. And, the market has kind of changed a lot. Now you're seeing a lot more wearing apartments and even private renters now, private landlords, excuse me, they're charging rent for the pets to help
Yes.
mitigate
Yes.
and non-refundable deposits. That's a
Yes.
real thing. I have a tenant now, he's never been late with a payment ever since he's been with me. And he has, he has multiple dogs, but he pays, $50 per month per pet.
Yeah.
And that's just what it is. And that just helps mitigate, because eventually one day when they leave, I'm going to have the effects of having to make ready with pets having been in there and the different things pets cost. Y'all, I've even had like a bunny rabbit, literally.
Yeah.
I had this one tenant in the past that had a bunny rabbit. I didn't think it was a big deal until when they were gone, then I saw the damage the bunny rabbit did, as far as like with the carpet and with the baseboard gnawing on it. So you really want to be cognizant about that.
And I think those are a lot of the costs that we sometimes don't think about when they talk about like the pros, and even in the argument of landlords, right? And why do landlords charge what they do? And it's because of these embedded costs that a lot of times tenants just aren't really aware of, whether it's, being able to get the property back up to standards, taxes, insurance. So when we're talking about a cost and investment going into the deal, a lot of times I think people are sticker shocked when they hear about how much realistically you need to be prepared to invest to buy a duplex that's turnkey ready.
Yep.
Yeah,
You know that you're not
absolutely.
going to have to go in and go find your own contractors to rehab this
Right.
thing.
Absolutely.
What would you say in regards to the numbers? Like, okay, cut like straight to the bone, as a client once said. Tell it to me straight
Okay,
to
straight
the
to the
bone.
bone. When you're dealing with new construction, ground up duplexes that are retail price and for retail sale. Obviously, right now we're in a little bit of a seller's market where the builders are offering more concessions. But even with that, there are important things you want to take away. One of the biggest things with new construction right now in Harris County, your escrow officer and the title officer, when they go to close the loan and the lender, it may be intentional, it may not be intentional. The taxes that they put into the escrow, right? A lot of times they'll do it on an undeveloped lot. Here in Harris County, undeveloped lot taxes, real dollar amount may be about $2,000 a year, right? But then once that tax bill is due, once the improvement is there in the subsequent year, you're looking at a tax bill that can be anywhere from $6,000 as high as $11,000 annually right now in Houston on a duplex. So you want to make sure you're just conservative and you account for that expense, number one. But even with that said, I would also say to everyone, as any homeowner, whether you're in a single family or multi, you have to make it an annual exercise to protest your taxes with Harris County because it's the responsible thing to do. It helps keep your mortgage costs down. It helps just, keep the whole community a little bit more affordable than it would be. So,
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Would you say that when you were kind of going through this process and you were meeting, some of these difficulties, how did you look to kind of weather the storm? Because sometimes whether it was some deal that you were looking to work through or negotiations that you're like, why is this not a win-win? Did you kind of sometimes bite the bullet or did you be like, hey,
I mean,
I'm gonna walk away?
sometimes you do bite the bullet. I mean, it's like tuition, right? You go to college or school is not free. You're going to pay for it one way or another. Even if it's a scholarship, there's someone that's paying. But one of the things I would reiterate when it comes to that is you just want to be in community with people that are also doing what you've done or have already done it well.
That's good.
Right?
Yeah.
You got to get in community with people and be able to, get into relationships with people. And I think it's important to note too, you always have to make sure that in the relationships you're in, you contribute, right? That contribution can look a lot of different ways.
Right.
It can be as little as just sharing resources. That goes a long way. You really want to get into community with other like-minded people that are dealing with what you had to go through. Ironically, the first build I had, it went into 2017 when we experienced Hurricane Harvey here in Houston, and that was a challenge in itself because I always tell people, especially in Houston or in the Gulf Coast period, whenever you build through the summer months and hurricane seasons, it can get very volatile for you. We've even witnessed here in Houston over the last several months, new construction sites get completely blown down by the windstorm. So that's a challenge, in itself. So I always let our clients know if you're going to build a ground up, whether it's a house or duplex through the hurricane season, there's a little bit of an increased risk there because of the windstorm. And so back to that Hurricane Harvey episode, what happened was, with the floods and all the other stuff, there was work everywhere for contractors. So the guys that were working on our job, their price was already fixed in an agreement, what they were going to get, but they were making more money on other jobs across the city. So they kind of left our job for a while. Yeah. And so it had me in a precarious position where this is my first build. My bank is looking at me like, what's going on? And I'm like, Harvey happened. Yeah. And so I'm having to figure out all these things and learn about pulling permits, figuring out I can't pull my own plumbing permit. I have to hire another plumber. And, when you're new and green and don't know people, they'll tend to sometimes take advantage of you. I remember my plumber left me stranded and I had to get another plumber to pull what's called a P2 permit to keep me going to the final. Well, he charged me $3,000. I didn't know any better to pull this permit. All he did is really pull a permit and, it was $3,000 and it was a loss I took, but it was a lesson as well.
Right.
Yeah. So what are your thoughts then? Because especially if we're talking about areas like Sunnyside, which are going through just huge revitalization right now. You talked about building on the lot. Can you pay too much for a lot? Can you pay too much for a duplex? Somebody once said that, you may buy at the top of the market or top of the moment, but you'll never buy at the top of the market. And so for people that are looking to invest in the community, should they wait or should they take advantage of the deal that's in front of them, even if it seems like they're kind of asking a lot right
I
now.
would say this, like when it comes to deals and getting into deals, you definitely want to make sure that you are not overpaying, because in real estate, this is whether you have a strategy to build to sell, or you're going to buy a retail product or build to rent. The money and the equity that you have and get for the next 30 some odd years, it starts at the point of acquisition.
Right.
So it's so important, like at that time, not to overpay. And also, I'll stress this too, just because you see a lot of people that are paying some certain prices doesn't necessarily mean it's right to do, because, you know, no one knows what's going to happen in the real estate market, but the last thing you want to do is, you know, be buying and purchasing either lots or completed projects kind of at the top of the market, because, you know, obviously you just don't know what the future holds. And so that goes hand in hand with what your payment is going to be and what your monthly obligations are.
And so we talked offline for a bit in regards to, we're starting to see a lot of people that purchased duplexes during the pandemic starting to sell them.
Yes.
What do you think that's about?
I think, honestly, in many cases, people that purchased duplexes during the pandemic, they may be going through a little bit of a sticker shock, you know, with just the increase in insurance here locally in Harris County. If you're not aware, the cost for insurance has gone up considerably just in the last 2 years. You know, even me personally, I talk about this. I had a single family rental that I comfortably paid $3,000 for a year, you know, in the annual insurance as a rental landlord policy with all of the thrills and everything. But now I went to renew it. That same policy with less coverages is now $6,000.
Wow.
So you can imagine what that does to your monthly payment. And then even as a property owner, what this makes you, you know, kind of maybe reconsider, should I kind of change a strategy up, or should I, you know, me personally try to only have certain types of assets right now that aren't as expensive to insure?
Right.
So those are the kind of things you want to kind of think about. And, you know, just to touch on, you know, the people that are selling now that bought during the pandemic, you know, maybe a lot of them just want to cash out too.
Yeah.
Because if you hold your property, if it's owner occupied for 2 years, you know, you don't have the capital gains tax. So they may just be cashing out and moving into a different investment. But, you know, everyone's case is a little bit different.
And we talk about that. We talk about transferring equity and being able to make the most out of the gains that you've been able to acquire. It might not be, especially if you're new and this is your first time being a landlord. I see it all the time. People are like, this is not
What I
for
thought
me.
it was going to be.
Like this,
This is new.
Matter of fact, just take the whole house off the market. Like, I don't want anybody in there. But I think, again, it's because there's sometimes this glamorized view of what it is
Absolutely.
to be a landlord.
Yeah.
Whether it's from vetting tenants, keeping it occupied, repairs, sometimes
Or even
your
increasing rents.
profit can be wiped
Yeah.
out depending on if you have a tenant, and then when they leave, you have to go and
That's, Chase, you bring up a great point. You know, the cash flow you can get in 2 years can be wiped out by one tenant when they leave, if you're not getting into that property enough to see the damages they leave. One time I know of this client they had $30,000 of damage done by a tenant that was there for 8 months and only paid rent for 1 month. You know, this was.
so what happened there? Because
Yeah, that is
I feel like that's a story time. Because
That's a lot.
How do you have a tenant in the home
For 8 months.
for 8 months? They only
Paid
paid
1 month,
1 month, and
$30,000.
then
Yeah.
like I'd be pissed.
Yeah,
Like,
they are pissed, and that one client, I mean, they still suffer from that to this day, but they bounce back. It's also
course.
resiliency. But
Of course.
in that specific case, that was like, you know, kind of during the pandemic, a tenant that
right.
wasn't well vetted. That was the issue with him.
From the
He
beginning.
wasn't vetted from the
Expectations.
beginning.
So what do you
Yeah.
mean when you say well vetted?
So there are a lot of different things you can do to vet prospective tenants. I mean, I recommend you do these things because they time and time again are true. You want to basically match what they put on the application to things like their bank statements, to you know, just different measures where you ask them to provide documentation in detail. It's important to collect the front and back of their driver's license as well, because you'd be amazed at all the scams nowadays. People, obviously, it's nothing new, the fake IDs. I mean, I'm an expert right now with identifying what's a fake ID in Texas. So, I mean, you just always want to go the extra step in vetting them. I've even gone as far as, if you have the time, if you tell me you work at a certain location or place, I'll go there.
Right.
You know, I will physically go there and vet that
Make sure
you
it's true.
actually do work there. True story, I went to a place where this applicant told me they worked. I went there, they told me they hadn't worked there in 2 years. So
So why would
you
you
just,
get?
you just want to go the extra mile in vetting tenants. And also, with the data you see, with the migration patterns into the greater Houston area, we have an influx of people coming from all over.
Right.
So that even makes it a little bit more challenging because now you have people that haven't even been here for a year or two and established themselves, and they're in the market now. But there's steps you can take to kind of protect yourself against, the bad apples.
Right. Do you feel like as you're looking to vet these people, has there been any type of like backlash, or are people like disrespectful in any way, or is it just that, hey, your
Yeah,
application's
well,
been declined?
people can have different reactions to you
Right.
vetting them, and that's fair and game, but you have to remember you're a business, right?
Right.
And so the way I vet is I kind of reverse engineered how like lenders vetted me before they let me borrow money.
That's a good
Because
point.
essentially what you're doing, you're giving someone access and rights to your property.
You are.
Right? And that's a big deal because, the eviction process is not the easiest process to get through correctly, like if you don't know the letter of the law. And I'll be honest with you, a lot of tenants, they do. They know better than landlords the eviction process. So some of them know how to play the game and skirt around eviction. So that's how an 8-month tenant can get away with living there and only paying 1 month of rent.
Yeah, that is that's so scary, right? And I think it just is a testament to building that professional sphere. Whether you're talking about, partnering with a realtor or a property management company, people that are going. And a lot of times, I think people don't want to have property management, right? Because that's an extra fee
Yeah,
that comes
like, they're
out.
cutting into my money.
Yes.
I don't want to pay that fee.
Yeah.
Very
Right.
short-term, limited perspective. And as a business owner, right, the goal is not to do everything,
Right.
It's
Right.
to be able to get into partnership with the people that, okay, this is your lane, you do this very well,
Exactly.
this is mine, and this is yours. And I think sometimes a lot of those headaches could be avoided if we did build the right team before we went in that. And that even includes, your handymen and your contractors, people that
Absolutely.
can come and take care of things that break, things that tenants break in a timely manner, so that way you don't have prolonged repairs that now have compounded into something
Exactly.
bigger.
Couldn't agree more. So, yeah.
From people who are looking to enter the market now, are you kind of noticing a little bit of a difference in regards to the entry, either whether that be acquisition cost or whether that may be that, hey, you might have to get in at a lower price just
Yeah.
because this $450,000 is not going to get you what you think it
Yeah,
is.
I think the biggest difference to me that I'm noticing if you're trying to get into it now versus like during the pandemic or before, man, the cost is so much more. Even when we talk about lower end, I mean, it's still considerable. 400,000, that's a lot of money to me. I don't know about you guys, but that's a lot of money.
It's a fee.
But you're just having to pay a little bit more than other investors did just in recent times, and then also the lending terms. Obviously they're a little bit different now. We got a little bit of an interest rate break, but everybody looked like a hero during the pandemic because interest rates were like 2, 3, 4%.
Right.
And you have a lot of people in those loans, and now you have a new wave of investors that are having to get in at 6, 7, 8, and some that got in as high as 9 and 10 in the last year. So that's the big difference right now. And I think people just need to prepare themselves for positioning into refinance opportunities, if it makes sense for
If
you.
it makes sense.
But why do you think investors would still buy, even at 8, 9, 10%, right? Because the narrative is, oh, rates are too high, right? I think the biggest challenge is that this idea that anything is too high, right? Whether it's sales prices or interest rates, and yet then you say, well, we've still got investors that are coming in at 10%. You got people that are buying properties with hard money loans, 12, 14%. So what's the benefit there?
I think the
what do
benefit,
they
it's a
know
couple
that-
of different things. Number one, it's the deal. Like if the deal makes sense and it can still cash flow even at a 7, 8, 9% interest rates, then it's all about the individual deal. And then another caveat that we get the luxury and benefit from, all of us of being in Houston, Harris County, a lot of investors all over the country see our real estate market is really safe. Right. So it's a safe place to put money if you're going to put money.
Even with the hurricanes.
Even with the hurricanes, they're saying it's even, even with the hurricanes, if you look at all reports out there, we are on target by, I think, the year 2060. Houston-Harris County to be the second largest metro in the entire U.S. We're going to pass up all of the ones in front of us. I think Dallas is going to be number one, but Dallas-Fort Worth area, but we have a lot of migration coming here. So, that's something that also, especially people here locally,
Right.
they don't appreciate that enough.
They don't see it.
Yeah.
They make the comments about the price points being higher, which they obviously are than they've been in recent times. But if you're talking about people that are coming from California, Florida, New York, or the Midwest, I mean, right now to them, Houston-Harris County is a deal right now because you can still park your money here safely. We don't have those wild swings in volatility and value like a lot of other markets. Even if you look back to 06, 07, 08, Houston-Harris County was one of the safest markets because we didn't take the hit that everyone did, and we were one of the first to bounce back and be resilient. So we're known as being a resilient market. But Chase, you bring up a good point. One of the biggest threats for Houston-Harris County is hurricane.
Yeah.
How that impacts us.
And they talk about a lot of the reasons why Houston is resilient. It's just because of the diversity of our economy,
Yep.
right? So we have oil and gas, we have healthcare, we have transportation and logistics, we have got the port, we've got all of these almost like incubators. And so if, oil and gas takes a hit, it's not like, okay, half the population is
Right.
out of
Right.
income and now we're having a strong foreclosure
Yep.
wave, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And so I think that's something to keep in mind when you're looking at stability in an area and just looking again at any city, yet the diversity of the economy and what can they bounce back on.
Absolutely. It's diversity of the economy, and it's also the fact that, the state is really business friendly from a tax perspective. That's why you see a lot of the companies from California coming
Right.
here. Even New York-based companies are now relocating here because tax planning is so important too as a business professional. Even if you own a single family home or a duplex, triplex, you're now a business owner and you need to tax strategize because those things are important. One of the things people don't consider is that, most people only see income as rent or revenues from a business, but income is also tax savings.
Yeah.
Quite
Right.
frankly. So that's another way to, make your balance sheet better is to tax plan and strategize. And so that's the interesting thing when you talk about new development and then when you talk about being a multi-unit owner and operator, you now enter a new realm of tax possibilities. So that's a huge part of it as well.
Something that I was kind of thinking about as I look within like the Sunnyside type of market for multifamily, are you noticing kind of like a really big difference between the sub-market groups of whether that is Sunnyside, Third Ward, or Fifth Ward? Are you noticing more development in one area than another?
Well, I think a lot of the development is concentrated in areas where there's no deed restrictions. I think that was one of my strategies early on too. I share the story a lot with people. I helped this client out several years ago with the duplex build in Acres Home, and we ended up getting sued because apparently the Civic Club had some deed restrictions against duplexes because the way their language was written is like, hey, you can only have single family homes. But the way the city of Houston ordinances are still written, they still deem a duplex as a single family home, but we ended up settling it out of court. So that's where you'll see a lot of the new development, especially with duplexes concentrated in those areas where there aren't any deed restrictions. So, I have my own personal home in Third Ward where I live. So Third Ward has a lot of different HOA and civic clubs, and they really do a good job of enforcing their deed restrictions and enforcing their different requirements as well from a new build perspective. So that's why you'll see a lot of the duplexes concentrated in a Sunnyside where there are a lot of unrestricted lots and land use. If you guys remember, the city of Houston, I think they just annexed Sunnyside in the 60s. So you have to remember when
I don't remember. I wasn't here. I wasn't here. But.
Yeah, me neither. But, so when these developments were originally first plotted, the land tracts, there were no restrictions, right? My father-in-law, he was born in the 1950s. He remembers what it was. And so he's like a lot of, horses, cattle, his grandmother's house. They raised chickens on it. And so now fast forward 40, 50, 60, 70 years later, there's all this new development, right, that's coming. And I can understand why it may be threatening and a little bit and cause a little consternation with people that have been here for generations because of the cost. The cost, the rise in property taxes and just everything that's happening. But, Houston has always been this way. If you look back, Houston is a city that attracts people from all over. So, It's been that way ever since I can remember. I got here in 1998. I was blessed and fortunate to take a class from a Rice University professor who the city and a lot of other government institutions locally lean on his data. And even then, when we were in the classes in the late 90s and early 2000s, he talked about how Houston was a melting pot and it would be a model for what America would eventually become. Fast forward, it's like 25 years later, and I'm like, man, everything he was
right on
saying
point.
happened.
Yeah.
So it's crazy.
Earlier you talked about how kind of hindsight is 2020.
Yep.
Do you believe that there's it's hard to say, do you believe there's a hindsight that we're not paying attention to now, but in 20 years, do you see negative repercussions to the amount of duplexes, multifamilies that are being built in these communities?
Well, I think anytime you have a large number of rental properties in a condensed area, that's going to cause a little bit of concern from city leaders and even local leaders as well, because you want to have an idea of what the future is going to look like. But you see how the economy is shifting across the entire country and globe, for that matter. I mean, the inflation has gone through the roof. And I know we all hear the whispers about how we're going to turn into a renter nation.
Yeah.
Right? You hear that. And I hope that doesn't come to fruition necessarily, but it looks like right now that's where things are kind of going, because it's not easy to qualify for, loans right now, especially with the price and entry point of everything being so much higher. And then with the wave of AI, how that threatens job growth and wage growth. There are things we have to consider long term, but just to close on that question, it's something we need to definitely follow and watch, and we just need to make sure that they're good players and good landlords that are in these communities too. I think that's what's so important. You don't want an area to turn into a slumlord haven.
Absolutely, and that's important. And I think even when we talk about renter nation, home ownership, and sometimes I'm on the fence about multifamilies because that price point is higher. If it takes you significantly longer to be able to qualify for the duplex than for you to be able to go ahead and purchase a single family, which may be at a lower price point, then like you mentioned, you had 4 single families before you guys got into that duplex. That's 4 different opportunities to parlay equity and to grow it and to build it, so that way you can't fund that. So my biggest concern is that while multifamily is definitely a play, cash flow and having a rental and adding doors is definitely a play. If it keeps you from being able to take action because you're waiting for the stars to align, then it's not a play.
Right? Exactly.
It's just a theory, and
it's just a talking point.
It's just a talking point that we all conceptualize, but we're not able to actually act on. And I think sometimes that's my biggest concern. And then again, just depending on what we call it a noise tolerance, right? You may not have the bandwidth to deal with all that comes with owning multifamily, managing multifamily. I mean, people talk about home ownership is hard because they got to cut the grass, and they don't like to do that, and the AC went out, and they don't like to do that, and that's just for your one home. And so when you're talking about doing this with 2 to 4 doors, straight from an apartment, I think that's sometimes my biggest concern, that it could be biting off more than you can chew.
Yep, absolutely.
Too early.
Yeah, I totally agree with that, because one of the things, I'm going to reiterate it again, is when you talk about multi-doors, whether it's 2, 4, 6, 8, or however many, you're sharing walls. It's multiple people living in closed, shared spaces with each other. So you're also managing people, right? Because I've had cases where neighbors didn't necessarily get along. So it's not just, okay, I own a duplex, but it's so much more, right? And you have to sharpen up on your property management skills, because at the end of the day, when it comes to owning rental real estate, that's what's going to keep you afloat and keep you moving in the right direction, are your property management skills. So again, community, get with people that are also into the same things as you and that are also becoming landlords. It's amazing how people, when in community, can share and learn from each other. Right, you always have to come at a place of humility. Right, I'm able to learn from anyone. I think that's one of the things. I never was the best student or anything like that, but what I was always able to do consistently, even in my sales career, is listen to people. Right, listen and learn, and then also the other part, you have to contribute. Right, you have to put in as much as you're taking out. Right.
I think something else too to add to that is that sometimes when clients are not willing or wanting to make any decision, so then it's like, hey, we're saying this single family may be your opportunity, and they're like, no, I really do want the duplex. And we're like, it's nothing like you can't get the duplex. It's at what cost? Because if you're sitting in indecision, it's still gonna cost you, whether
Right.
that's
There's
money,
an opportunity cost.
opportunity cost,
Yep.
time. Now you're talking about real money,
Yep.
and I think like in this market and the times that we're in, it's like really deciding what it is that you want and being very clear with it will then allow you to maximize the opportunities that you do see in the market. And so, yeah.
And I think that also when you are talking about a duplex specifically, right, it's not absolution from a mortgage.
Right.
That unit B is not going to cover the
No,
whole thing. And I
not
think
at all.
sometimes that's a
Exactly.
misconception too. You know, it's to alleviate some of the burden of that total mortgage cost. So if you're buying a $450,000 unit and it costs $4,000, then if you can offset this by maybe $1,500 or $1,600, that's still a benefit, right?
Yeah,
But to go
absolutely.
into it with the idea that, okay, I'm going to get this duplex, I'm going to have the tenant pay $3,000. Well, now you're back to being that landlord that has unrealistic expectations
Right.
on what the rental market is doing.
And something else I caution people of, especially if you're getting a lot of these duplex loans with owner-occupied financing at 3%, 5%, you need to make sure you understand the rules of the loan program you're in. That's very important because some of those rules govern how you can use the other side that you don't live in, like in what type of tenant. Some mandate that it has to be a long-term tenant. You know, Airbnb and short-term rental, that's the talk of the town right now, right? Houston right now, there are a lot of Airbnb and STR operators because our market isn't regulated yet, but you still want to be cognizant of those rules. And Chase brought up a good point. It wouldn't be wise to think that you're going to get into a duplex, especially if you're only paying 3-5% down, and the other renter is going to cover all of the
entirety
expenses.
of the
It's not
mortgage.
going to happen, more than likely, unless you're getting into a great deal and you find, an off-market product, but not going to happen in a retail situation. So
pivoting to Airbnb, because that's a strategy that you used as well and or still use as well. And I know that during the pandemic, that was super big. Everybody, I mean, that was
Everybody was making some money.
all, the keywords. If we could go and Google, I'm pretty sure it was Airbnb, arbitrage, and
Yeah.
LLCs.
Yeah.
Those were probably the
We
top
had
three
all of that.
keywords
We did.
of 2020. And then things just kind of shifted. It just seemed like people were really talking about Airbnb. People would even come to us like, "Can you help me buy an Airbnb?" Which I always thought was weird because I was like, you don't really buy Airbnbs. Those are
Right.
strategies
yeah,
that
that's
you
a
can
strategy.
use. But
You bring up a great point. That's a
a
strategy.
strategy.
You
That's-
don't buy an Airbnb.
It's not the entire
Airbnb
plan.
Right, 'cause I would always
STR
say,
is a
like,
strategy you use.
you still need to be able. The lesson is you need to be able to afford whatever you buy
Absolutely.
by yourself.
Yep.
And so for me, the concern when people will say, well, can you help me buy an Airbnb? Well, what if Airbnb crashes? And then now all of a sudden that $200 a night that you was getting in a pandemic, and then that's not there anymore because like you said, the city's starting to bring down regulations or guidelines or
Yeah, they're
whatever
coming.
that case is.
Regulations are coming to Houston probably later this year. They'll be announced. I think the city of Houston wants to pair their STR regulations kind of like what the city of Arlington did. I went to a city council meeting earlier in the summer, and that's what they kind of suggested. But you definitely want to kind of understand what Airbnb or short-term rentals are. It's a strategy you can use. And if you go into it only trying to employ that single strategy, you're going to be in trouble. Even in my personal properties that I have, you want to be as dynamic as possible if your loan product allows for it. You don't want to only have one strategy in play unless that strategy works for you. So in my buildings, I'll definitely sometimes have Airbnb, other STR platforms, direct rentals where I rent directly to people long term. Even people visiting the city that come in, I'll rent to them for like 2-3 months at a time that they'll be here. And then we also have like the fully furnished listings as well. You just want to be as dynamic as possible and cast a wide net of customers and definitely know how to service them. So I think that's important, not to just become singularly focused on Airbnb or STR.
Yeah.
What would you kind of say are like some of the more painful things people experience because they only look to leverage, whether it was Airbnb or it was STR, and then they're now like, why isn't this happening the way I thought it was going to happen?
Well, I think one of the words that are kind of overused and overstated right now is passive. Everyone
income.
thinks something is going to be passive. You can just sit back, kick your legs up, and things are going to run like a machine. When I talk amongst other investors in our groups and everything, we notice the people that have the most success, they're actually getting involved in different things day to day, because you want to see the day-to-day changes and the week-to-week changes. I mean, I'll stress it again, you want your property to be as dynamic as possible if your lending product allows for it, because Houston, we have so many visitors that come into the city. And then even from a long-term rental perspective, I mean, I can think of myself after I first finished college and, it was time to get my first apartment. I mean, it was a challenge for me. I never signed my own lease before, right? So that was a process in itself. You just have to kind of know where to market and how to market to people. And then also the important piece of this is service, right? You want to provide world-class customer service, regardless of what your strategy is, if it's long-term rentals, if it's a mix of the Airbnb, STR, ultimately, and you guys can appreciate this in your business. I mean, service ultimately will distinguish you from the marketplace.
Yeah, and that's something I noticed with a lot of your Airbnbs. I actually refer a lot of your Airbnbs to clients or friends that are looking, for short-term housing. And the level of detail, you're almost like a hotelier. I mean, you've got, it's fully furnished, you've got all of the amenities, you got snacks and
yeah, well, they're going to start
the food deliveries.
Yeah.
I mean, and I say that because I think, again, it goes back to, right, you get what you put into it.
Right,
You can't shortcut the process, cheapen the process. I'm not going to fix the property up. I'm not going to do this. I'm not going to make it convenient, right? Because these are visitors, right? And so at the end of the day, they can choose between your property or the hotel.
Right.
And if it becomes too complicated or if it looks too scary, I'm going to go to the hotel.
Yeah,
and I think
absolutely.
that's a very real thing. And
Yeah,
you got to keep that in mind and who your ideal audience is.
Absolutely.
So when we're talking about, Houston's big on events and conventions and
Sporting events,
healthcare,
huge.
travel nurses, these are people that are coming and looking for a nice stay.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
it's very important that you're just very cognizant. And sometimes and that's why sometimes we'll tell our clients, Randy, it may be more than what you're expecting now, but if this is the type of tenant or client that you're looking to acquire, it's going to be worth that investment.
Absolutely.
Because not investing that and kind of taking the shortcut up front is going to qualify what kind of people are attracted to your home.
Right, absolutely. And it's going to make a difference in the sustainability of your business because, again, we always reiterate you have to take a long-term approach, right? Because, you're going to have hot market cycles, and then you're going to have slow market cycles like post-pandemic with the Airbnbs and STRs, how they kind of slowed down. And full transparent moment, I mean, for me, it didn't slow down that much. We kept kind of grinding and moving things forward. And so we were able to kind of sustain through that noise when everyone was saying, Airbnb is done and STR is done. It's not necessarily done. You're just going to see a wave of players come and go. And even as the city of Houston ushers in these new regulations, you're going to see more of that happen. But I think uniquely, it's going to present opportunity for people that really want to stand out from the crowd. So I'm anxious to kind of see how these regulations come into play. But at the same time, we're always consistently looking to long-term lease our properties as well. I probably review about a dozen applications every day. And, the applications that stand out, we really want to take care of those people.
I think something that you mentioned too is that you're not allowing your circumstances to be dictated by the market. So you're allowing yourself to keep on pushing forward and saying that, hey, like, I get it, it's a little slow right now, but it doesn't mean that we're going to allow this to define how we look to move forward and how we look to build our business. And I think that's a testament to who you are and your character and honestly the values that you've probably instilled within the company too.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's very important. At the end of the day, you have to provide that service. You have to provide a certain level of service. And then just from experience in business, everything isn't always going to be on the up, right? No. Everything isn't always going to look crystal clear. But, those who keep running through the mud and through the rain and get their elbows dirty, you're going to likely have, better outcomes than the crowd. You'll be able to stand out. But just the whole notion of passive income right now, it's kind of changed post-pandemic. During the pandemic, I keep reiterating it, everybody was a hero. You can do a million things wrong and still make money.
Still make money.
But it's not like that right now in this environment. So you're going to start to see, kind of see people come and go. But, we just want to sustain and still be relevant in the marketplace, even through these uncertain times.
When you talk about passive, I'm reminded of this story that Oprah shared actually, and she was going through and signing checks and doing whatever. Oprah, she still signs her own checks.
Absolutely.
And I remember one time she said she was looking at something and she saw a suit and it was like super expensive. She was like, why is this suit so much? And she shares about her weight loss journey, and she was saying like, well, we actually had to buy two and put them together, right? And I share that because a lot of times we leverage out the responsibility of our due diligence, right?
Yes.
Oh, my accountant handles that. And we never look at the numbers.
Yes.
It was because Oprah signs her checks that she was able to see, and that actually led to a conviction on her weight loss and getting serious about it, because it was like, oh, wow, I'm looking at this black and white. Like, this is reality.
Too much.
When people were kind of like, hiding around the truth of the matter and not wanting to say, like, what they had to do. And when you talk about passive, I think that goes back to, everything that you outsource comes at a cost.
Absolutely.
And you have to decide, is it to your benefit? Is it a value of your time? Like, it may not be a value of my time to go learn how to build a house.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't have the bandwidth. That's not the ministry I'm in right now. So it may be beneficial for me to call you. However, I might need to, for that first year, be a landlord and go through the nitty gritty before I go hire a property manager, so that way I know what I'm looking for.
Yep, you know what you're looking for. You get experience in knowing what things cost. Like, sometimes people don't even realize the cost of a plumber coming to do service work for you. Sometimes people can be a little bit surprised. Wait a minute, why does it cost that? Well, simply put, the time someone has to drive and come to your job, that's not free. People think a plumber is going to come and show up to do a $30 job for $30. Doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
It doesn't work like that. But you bring up a great point. I think it's absolutely the thing to do if you can allow for it, to actually landlord your own properties and manage your own properties when you first get into it. So you get that learning piece of it. You appreciate the process. You appreciate managing people. You appreciate managing trades and subcontractors, and get to see, oh, okay, that's what managing one door is like. And if you tick it up to 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, you're like, okay, you get a better appreciation for it. So you brought up a great point.
So we always like to give the audience homework. Let's start with a few things. If you're getting started right now, going into purchasing multifamily, what does that team need to look like? Who are the key people that you need in your world?
So if you're purchasing multifamily, are we talking about a retail product or just off the MLS?
Let's talk about what the difference is.
Okay, so if you're purchasing multifamily or any product that's, say, off the MLS, you definitely want a good realtor on your team. And let me describe for you what a good realtor is. If you're looking in a certain market, a good realtor is someone that knows that market. They underwritten, okay, what are real rents in this market? What's insurance in this market? What is my cost of owning in this market? That's a good realtor. You also want to have, if you don't already have one, you want to establish relationships with title companies that can really protect you, right? Because it's important, especially in our scammy world nowadays, that you're working with a reputable title company. They're not all the same. You want to use one that's reputable, one that doesn't have a million complaints and lawsuits against them. And then obviously, you yourself, you have to become more involved. Like, don't sit back, like to your point you just mentioned, don't sit back and just allocate everyone to do everything for you. Yeah. You need to allocate time to sit and learn with these people and also understand what they're doing as well. But, building your team is of utmost importance.
Okay, awesome. Did you want to do that?
I just think anything that I've seen, like in more so dealing with clients or any consultations, is more so that the ability to actually think for oneself and also be willing to make that decision and push forward. Yep. And the reason why I think that's just so big, more so just either for me or when working with clients, is because even if we see the actual property, you know what the numbers are and you're clear on what it needs to look like, and you still say, I don't know. It's like, well, at this point, you also have to be willing to make the decision to move forward to then better your life and your circumstances.
How did you and your wife get over those fears? Like, who brought the conversation to who?
I think I brought the conversation up to her. She may say something different, but I think I brought the conversation up to her. Like, hey, we got to find another way to invest outside of just our job and 401ks and the traditional methods because
Right.
there's just so much uncertainty,
Right.
right? And so in my day job, I was in sales. I noticed that all of these people from different walks of life, they all had some real estate in their portfolio and it was important to them. And so I would tell my wife, I'm like, man, whether it's a small business owner or even all the way up to the owners of these buildings we're actually in right now, I've
Right.
done deals with them and it's like real estate had to become part of our portfolio and how we would look into the future. And, we have two beautiful children too. So, we want to be able to provide opportunities for them that we may not have necessarily had, and that's no shade to our parents. It's just through the times things change, right?
Yeah.
So it's a responsibility as a parent and being a good steward in this community to, push things forward.
What were some of those limiting beliefs that you guys had to overcome?
Limiting beliefs, I'll be honest with you and transparent. You always think, oh, I don't have enough money or I don't have the income. And it's just learning loan products. That's a lot of it.
Yeah.
I'll tell you guys, one interesting product that really kind of sprung during the pandemic was DSCR lending. Now, I always advocate to people to go the conventional lending route if you can, because that money is always cheaper. But sometimes if you're really trying to scale things, you can work in conjunction with conventional banks and then also the DSCR lending. That's what I've personally done. And I know guys that own like 200, 300 unit apartment complexes all over Houston. They use the same product to help scale quickly. It's just all of a matter of learning how to underwrite and make sure the deal you're buying works for you and that deal is going to cash flow. That's so important.
Yeah.
Because the last thing you want to do is be paying for real estate, because then at that point, it's on the wrong side of your balance sheet and it's a liability instead of being an asset.
And that's why that lender is going to be important as well to your team and making sure that you
Absolutely.
have somebody that understands your full vision
Yep.
and goal. They're not just, I think with everything, you're not looking to get partnered with anybody that's just looking to put you in something.
Right.
And it doesn't understand your full vision. So you've got to be transparent in being able to convey what it is that you're looking to do. And then that partner that you're with, that advisor, lender, whoever, they need to be able to be transparent. This is what that really costs. And again, one of the biggest misconceptions, even though you don't always need money, you need money.
You do need money.
You do need money, right? Because I think it sometimes is that conversation gets too magnified and people are like, I ain't got no money, but I'm going to get this.
Exactly.
And it's like, okay, but financing anything at 100% is not wise.
Right.
So you want to be able to have skin in the game so that way you can weather the storms. And I always say you want to get your cost as low as possible.
Absolutely.
Because that's going to help you cash flow. If you finance 100%,
it's going to be tougher to cash flow.
you're going to have to
Almost
have higher
impossible.
rent to be able to cash flow, and
Yep.
you're going to price yourself out the market. So, Randy, did you want to add or closing with anything?
I just think it's important if there were three things I would say for anyone looking to more so invest, period, is have a certain level of discernment in regards to your due diligence of the deal. Have great counsel around you who you're able to bounce feedback off of, and honestly, put some emotion aside and be as logical as possible as you're looking to get into the deal.
Awesome. So, Gilbert, you've helped plenty of families start their wealth building journey by building on their own lot, building duplexes, and really kind of being able to serve as counsel. Tell us about your company, how people can partner with you.
Okay, so Grace Building Company, we're a development company. We have a niche in developing income properties. We built ADUs, which are basically small mother-in-law suites, and primarily duplexes. We're looking to start our first 3 and 4 and 5+ builds here in 2025. So you can find me on Instagram at Houston Duplex and also on X. And I think the important thing is, if there's any message I want to leave people with, it's about relationships. Build relationships and build rapport with people. It's all about meaningful relationships. I think so much nowadays you see people that chase these transactional relationships and, you kind of get away from, that long-term sustainability.
Right.
I've been a sales professional for almost 25 years now of my life. And one of the biggest lessons I've learned from my career is that in any sales job or any sales position, it's hard to repeatedly chase new customers.
Yeah.
The customers you do get, treat them well. They turn into repeat customers and they turn into customers that refer you.
Right.
We don't really advertise much. If you notice that, we don't do a lot of advertising on our business, but my company, we're always busy because, I'd like to think we've done great work. We've been very upfront and honest with people, and we've delivered on expectation, right? That's the important thing. You always want to work with people that can actually execute and show you that they've executed. And it's important that they've executed, during the pandemic times and even post-pandemic now. Pay attention to who isn't building anymore, who's really slowed down. I mean, because that points to some different things that maybe a novice wouldn't understand. There are a lot of people getting sued right now in the city of Houston that people don't even realize. There's a lot going on behind the scenes that you need to really just pay attention to. But I would just say to really focus on building relationships and contributing these relationships.
Absolutely. Well, we appreciate you guys just for tuning into this episode. Like I always say, there is no culture without ownership. And when it comes to our communities, the best way for us to protect them is to have skin in the game and actually own the units and the homes that are there. It's how we control the rents. It's how we protect the elderly. It's really how we change the narrative of what is a story being told here in Houston, Harris County. So we thank you guys for tuning in. I'm Chase Sloan. This is Randy and Bougie. And of course, we got Mr. Gilbert. And we will see you guys next week.
Let's get it.